you give up your sovereignty if you can't print your own money. And, fractional reserve banking and central banking, we basically outsource the sovereignty of our nation to private citizens, half of which aren't even U.S. citizens. So for sure, he's probably figuring, how do I do this in such a way that I can bring about this change, and one way is let them hang themselves. The other way is to put pressure on them and get documents into the public where they can see the sweetheart deals that were cut between our banks and the European banks and some of the Asian banks, that Americans lost their homes and these people got free money. Can you imagine those headlines? So I'd love for it to happen. I know he would support it in a New York Minute, pardon the pun, but he's absolutely for the sovereignty of the U.S. And it's so misleading to say, well, if the governments control the money, they're going to outspend us. Well, the central bankers have already debased their currency 99%. So, it's not like they have any kind of leg to stand on in that regard. That argument to me is moot. I'd rather have a politician debase it that I could throw out of office versus a central banker, which I don't even know what they're doing.
Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Bob Kudla. Bob is the owner and creator of TradeGeniusAcademy.com, and I am very happy to have him back on the X22 Report Spotlight. Bob, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Hey, Dave. Happy New Year to you.
Hey, Happy New Year to you, too. And I wanted to start off, and right now we're in crazy times with the economy. The mainstream media is on one side, Trump's on the other side, and Trump has been talking a lot about economic security, where he's saying economic security is national security. In your mind, what do you think this all means when he continually says this?
Yeah, so, it's interesting if this goes back actually to 1991, where Trump did an interview that he's saying essentially the same things he's saying today. And, he's a nationalist by nature, and I'm in agreement with his approach. And what happened here is the globalists have saw an opportunity to basically spread out, the strength of the U.S. to, Europe and into Asia so they can enrich themselves. And at the same time, what happened is that we lost our ability to supply critical industries to our nation's defense. And you notice Trump said manufacturing, the steel industry, high tech, chip fabrication, all those things are essential for our nation to be able to survive, because he's a forward-thinking guy, and he recognizes the fact that as these currencies get debased and as trade starts to become more and more of a game of trust, that a nation may decide not to send the steel over to us, or maybe ask for our gold, or ask for something we're not ready to give up, and then we're being extorted. And so that's why he absolutely is for that. That's why he opened up the oil and gas drilling. He's like, look, we can feed ourselves, we can energize ourselves, we can manufacture ourselves. We don't need any other nation, and therefore now we can be king of the hill. It's a smart strategy, and the nations that can't do those things are in deep trouble going forward.
So do you think that globalism right now is in a decline? Do you think a lot of the nations are struggling right now to hold on to globalism? And do you think that...
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
No, it's interesting. I think globalism is a European, construct. And reason being is that they're the ones that at least able to operate in a non-global world. They're the ones that were very big on the colonialism and, extracting resources and cheap labor from around the world to feed it, an area of the world that has very little of both. And so the Chinese picked up on it because they saw that as an advantage for them, and the Asian markets for mercantilism. But to answer your question in the short run, globalism is absolutely on the retreat. You see populism rising everywhere now, and as currencies get more and more mistrusted, is that trade's going to start declining more and more, and that's going to cause issues with this global game that we're playing. And I think that's another reason why Trump is pushing so hard to get our resources into this country, because it absolutely is not going to last. The flat earth of Friedman is gone. And basically you're only going to trade on things you have to import and versus trying to do this supply chain around the world, leveraging labor costs and things of that nature. And basically the people losing control over their own nation because, these global corporations now operate with impunity outside nations' laws. And you've seen that being attacked now more and more vociferously.
So do you think the deal that he's trying to make with China, where he's saying, he's been tweeting out, we're going to make a deal with China. Do you think he's doing this because everything was lopsided in favor of China and not the U.S.? Is that why he's doing this?
Yeah, I mean, look, how often can you bleed out $500 billion of your trade? At some point, it bankrupts you. You become a slave into the person that you're importing from. And so, even if he didn't do it, at some point, our currency would collapse, or this trade will have to rebalance. And so he said, "Look, I'm going to take it out of the hide of the Chinese instead of my own people." And so, so I think the Chinese trying to do this olive branch with them is I think they're just making lemonade out of lemons that they know they're stuck with right now.
Yeah, and China, they gave an olive branch. They said, listen, we'll increase U.S. imports by $1 trillion during the next 6 years. Is this going to be enough, or do you think this is just the beginning?
That's only 1/3 of the deficit. So I think that's they probably did the math on the tariffs and said that's how much we lose anyway. And so I think Trump will ask for a lot more. Look, we need to balance the trade completely with China. If you think about China for a second, what do they import? They only import things they have to have, right? Commodities and energy and some strategic metals that they don't mine locally, and food. None of their consumer products and nothing value added do they import unless they intend to reverse engineer and steal it. So I'm a little unclear as to what the Chinese are going to get from us that we'd be willing to give them, that they're not going to turn right around and reverse engineer and compete with us on the world market with. Because, just because we send them stuff doesn't mean 10 years later that they're going to use those same technologies that they can't do themselves, but they import from us. And they're going to then go ahead and compete with us on the world stage with the same products and then make our exports less valuable. So I think it's a bit of a Trojan horse myself. And I just think we should just say to China, we're just going to import less from you instead of export more to you. That's my view.
Last time we spoke, we talked about politicians running scared. Right now, we're in a shutdown, and we can see Pelosi and Trump, they're battling out. She is trying to cancel the State of the Union. He canceled her flight out to Afghanistan and other countries. I mean, the politicians right now, they're getting very nervous and afraid of Trump. Because there's a lot of investigations going on. He continually tweets out about Comey, about Clinton, and about many others who are corrupt. Who else has joined them where they're nervous and afraid of what he's doing right now?
You mean around the world? Well, the Chinese are absolutely scared to death. They literally turned on the yuan printing machine. I mean, 1 trillion yuan they're going to spend above and beyond what they're going to spend last year on infrastructure projects. Their banking system is absolutely bankrupt, and their liquidity, meaning the money, the banks don't even have the cash in the banks to give to the people if they needed to. So the government is printing just to keep their banks alive. So the Chinese are in a world of hurt, and in Europe, you just look at it. The Italians are like, hey, we're going to spend money. The French, Macron, he might be fighting the Yellow Jackets, but he's offered many concessions already, to his people. And look, and we'll see what happens with Brexit. But you can see the people are getting agitated, and the politicians are very, very nervous. And in the U.S., I think Trump has the left by the short hairs. Look, he knows he's not guilty of any crimes, and he now knows that a lot of people in the Democratic Party are, and he must be driving them nuts because he's not sharing it with them yet. And, so he's going to be able to extract a lot of concessions going forward, in my view.
Now, he continually contradicts the Fed. And he keeps pointing the finger at the Fed, where he's saying, if we have a problem in the economy or the economy goes down, it's all the Fed's fault. Are the central bankers, and also there's been articles out about how the central banks around the world are worried about their independence. Are the central bankers worried about what he's doing? Because I do believe this whole globalism, the whole thing that we were seeing was part of the central bankers' plan. Now everything is being reversed. So are they nervous and afraid?
Oh, without a doubt. Look, if we go into a deflationary collapse, the least of the bank's worries are that we go into depression. These people may get dragged out of the buildings. Look what's happening in France. They're running tractors through the bank front doors. And I think people have correctly now understood that these central bankers are really tools of the progressive politicians to basically spend economies into oblivion. You have to look no further than Venezuela to see that. And so Trump's like saying, why do we have unelected bureaucrats that really don't have our national interests at heart? One could make the case that the central bankers are really run out of Europe, and that we've been basically a tool of the European elites ever since 1913, whenever it is we started this. I mean, they put us in a war the very next year to fight a battle in Europe, and I don't think that's ever stopped. And so now, Trump's trying to wrestle control over our banking system and our monetary system. Because look, these guys are operating under different priorities than our president. And I'll give you an example. And I just saw this today. In 1922 to 1928, the bankers are doing the same thing that they're doing now. They flooded the market with treasuries and with credit. It was under a different name, and they pumped the stock market up to absurd heights, and then they pulled the rug out. And Hoover was too weak to fight them, and he was also a reformer, by the way, and they destroyed him, and they destroyed the economy. And with Trump, he's not stupid. I think he saw this right away, because they did it with Bush 1 as well. They started to raise interest rates on Bush 1, and he lost the election to Clinton, who was absolutely a globalist. And Trump's like, hey, I'm getting in front of this train, and I'm going to put it right on the square on these guys' backs. And I think he pushed them off the dime. And now they don't know what to do, because now if the stock market rolls over, he just simply points to, hey, you're still pulling away the balance sheet, you're still raising interest rates, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, and we need to take more control. One of the things that's floating around, as you're well aware of, is that they may not call it auditing the Fed or cutting the Fed down, but they may call it reforming the Fed or bringing independent people in. Fed talks about independence. What they really mean, independence of transparency. What we would talk about with independence is that non-bankers are involved in setting policy versus the bankers who basically are supporting their own actions and, in their own, monetary profit, goals and political goals.
So right now like you said, China's in trouble. They're printing like crazy. The Fed, they already said, listen, we might not be raising rates maybe 2 times in 2019. Not sure. A lot of the other Fed heads are saying, let's not do anything. They're supposed to be shrinking their balance sheet right now. The ECB said they're going to be shrinking their balance sheet and they're going to start raising rates. Is this actually happening?
No. In fact, since the end of November, every balance sheet in the world except for the U.S. is skyrocketing. And that liquidity is flowing back into the U.S. That's the reason why we have this dead cat bounce we have in the stock market right now, is that the ECB, the Japanese, the Chinese have absolutely raised their balance sheet assets. And the United States, we've flattened ours. So instead of it being reduced and more money going back into the private sector, they're doubling down. And and I don't think they're going to stop, Dave. I think they're really going to get even more aggressive, and that's what's going to put us into these inflationary environments, because they feel they can deal with inflation better than they can deal with deflation.
So what does this mean for gold and silver then, if the central banks now are doing the opposite of what they're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, I mean, anything that has scarcity value is going to go up in price. You're already seeing it. Palladium and platinum are moving up. There's a shortage in the London vaults that they can't cover because the demand's too high for it. And that's the precursor to what's going to happen when silver and gold go into deficit and people start asking for it. Yeah, I mean, our view is that silver probably over the next 2 years will go up from $15, at least 50, maybe to $75, and gold will at least double, and if not more, because one of the tools that they have and what the president could do is simply reprice the price of gold and say, I'm paying debt off with gold, but you have to buy my gold at X price and wipe out the deficit or debt that way. So yeah, we don't see anywhere but going higher. And then oil's an interesting animal because oil was a place where a lot of people, a lot of wealthy stored value, but we're producing so much of it, Dave. The technology is getting so good. They found another billion barrels of oil in West Texas, another billion barrels of oil in the Gulf of Mexico. Is that I think the high oil prices are gone. I think they're going to struggle keeping them at these prices. In fact, they'll probably drift back down into the 30s. However, natural gas prices are going to probably go up much higher because of the cold weather, and the ability to store it is much more limited. And you'll see opportunities to buy and trade natural gas to the plus side, even if oil languishes, which is great news in a sense because people use a lot more oil than they use natural gas in terms of a percentage of their income. And so, some parts of the United States now went sub $2 a gallon of gas. And I think that's going to put America in a really strong economic position, being an exporter of these commodities.
And what about food?
Yeah, up until this year, we've been having surplus after surplus because Russia and the Ukraine just had fabulous harvests. But the supplies are now gone. The excess harvests are gone. And this year, for the first time, the people who've been selling and speculating, just like they do with palladium and platinum, in the London exchanges, they sold more food at prices too low than they can't find it now. So you're going to start seeing food prices start to go up. And you're talking corn, soybean, wheat. The Chinese are trying to get their hands on as much soybean as possible. And that's the issue they have right now with us, is because they stopped buying our food, but they didn't really. We started selling our food to Argentina, and Argentina was selling it to the Chinese. It just went a different route. But the Chinese are in deficit with food. And that's the area to watch. If China can't feed themselves and they're printing like they're printing, and people won't accept their yuan, that means they're going to have to use dollars, and their dollar reserves are falling, and it could cause China to go into some sort of a collapse. And that's bad news for all of us, but that's definitely now on the table again, which is good, though, for gold and silver and those kind of precious metals, because they'll absolutely go up in value. The Chinese will be buying them locally hand over fist, and it'll just make the prices go higher. So a lot of opportunities in that area.
So if you don't mind me asking, what are you doing right now to get around all this? Because it seems like it's just very chaotic in what is happening with the Fed, with the Chinese. What are you specifically doing to maneuver around all of this?
Yeah, I mean, we've been really consistent. Our view is that when you get opportunities like we're having in the stock market, doing these bounces, this is the third time you have an opportunity to get out. The price of the stock market is the same as it was in 2017. So it's gone nowhere now for almost 2 years. It just doesn't look that way because people only remember the ramps up. But you need to get out of the stock market in general, and you need to be moving your assets into these commodities. And so we think these trends are secular, Dave. We think natural gas is going to increasingly go up in value. We think food prices are going to increasingly go up in value. This is at the commodity levels. We think gold and silver are going to keep going up in value, and the miners are leveraged to gold and silver. So that's where we're staying, and that's where we're playing. And cryptocurrencies are an antidote to the banking system. If you notice, since August, they've not been able to put down any of the commodities anymore. Something changed in the world banking systems that put a floor under all these commodities. And now we're lifting from those levels. And so that's what we're staying with. We're not looking at every different thing. We're not chasing every shiny new penny. We're looking for opportunities to buy and add and buy and add gold, silver, miners, uranium for energy, natural gas for energy, and then cryptocurrencies to basically catch the sine wave right now, because it's been in a pretty big trading range for the last 2 months. So that's what we're doing. To us, we're very calm. We think our information is good. I apologize for that. Hold on. We think our information is good. We think the trend's secular, and so we're just keeping focused on that.
So you mentioned cryptocurrencies, and we noticed that cryptocurrencies have come down quite a bit. And central bankers, they've been demonizing cryptocurrencies like crazy. We don't like them. Criminals use it. Same thing with gold and silver. They tell you it's a barbarous relic and things like that. And I always think to myself, if they're telling me that means I should have that because I do everything the opposite the central bank does. Where do you see cryptocurrencies going? Do you think countries will eventually use these as some type of or some form of currency?
Yeah, I don't know if the governments themselves will, but people will increasingly do so. Because what's going to happen is you're not going to trust the currency. Let's say you want to trade with China and you just don't, and they don't have dollars. They want to give you yuan. You're like, well, I don't want your yuan because I don't know what to do with it when I have it. So I rather you give me Bitcoin, or I rather you give me Litecoin, or I want a cryptographic contract that when I deliver or you deliver, payment is made without all the hijinks that go on sometimes between nations and their judicial systems. And so I think that's where you're going to see more and more with trade. And, I don't know if you noticed this, but just yesterday, Coinstar, the people that you get your change and you get money, they're putting Bitcoin in every one of their Coinstars, which is huge. So it's going to become more and more mainstream. And as these banking systems start to go under, look, Germany is the strongest nation in Europe, and their banking system, the liabilities on their banking system dwarfs the GDP of that country. And so when these banks get runs on them, people that have money in those banks are going to be stuck. What happened in Greece? It's just going to take one more of those where people say, I'm just pulling my money out. I'm going to put it into a cryptocurrency, and then I'm going to make people trade with me with that same cryptocurrency, and I'm just going to sidestep the whole banking system. I think that's what you're going to see. I think the governments are going to fight it like they've been fighting it, Dave, but they'll eventually lose because it'll become one of those things, a fact on the ground kind of a thing, like they're doing with immigration here. Hey, if we get enough people in the country, we just make it a fact on the ground, and then you got to deal with a position of weakness. I think that's what's going to happen with cryptocurrency. It's just going to overwhelm the system. I don't think it starts in the U.S. I think it starts in Asia or in South America or somewhere in Europe, but the U.S. will absolutely play, but it'll lift the prices of everything. You got to realize too, I know I'm monologuing here a little bit, but all these major coins now are reaching the end of their number of units that they're able to now create. And so they're going to start having a finite supply, and that's going to lift the value as well. 21 million Bitcoins, if you can get it for $3,000 or $3,600, what it is today, most middle and upper middle class people will have enough free capital to buy one of those. And if all of a sudden it becomes something, look, the Russians are talking about buying $40 billion worth of Bitcoin. Well, I think the market cap of Bitcoin is 150 billion. Well, what do you think that would do to the price, right? And Russia may do that just to tweak the nose of the bankers, saying, I've created a commodity now that will rival your banking system, your SWIFT system. And then all the people that were scrambling for Bitcoin starting to see the price start to fly again. And those outlandish price claims then could become real because 85% of these coins are locked up, Dave. So where's Russia going to buy them, right? They'll create an open market scarcity. And probably the Russians have been buying all along. As far as we know, they probably already have their 40 billion worth. And all they have to do is announce that they're in the market, and they just made themselves a lot of money and then put the Western governments on notice that, hey, there's another banking system out there that doesn't go through Basel, Switzerland.
You mentioned,
and that's huge. And you got to play that. That's a smart thing to do. Invest $3,500 to just in case, you might get a 10 bagger or a 100 bagger. It's a bet I'd take all day long.
Yeah, you mentioned that Putin, they might invest, or they might have already invested in Bitcoin to snub their nose at the bankers. And I just wanted to go back to what you said a little while ago about auditing the Fed, looking at the Fed, because there are two bills in the House right now, H.R. 24 and 25. H.R. 24 is, I believe, is Thomas Massie, where he wants to audit the Fed. H.R. 25, I believe, is to abolish the IRS. And I just wanted to read this tweet from Trump. It says, "It is so important to audit the Federal Reserve, and yet Ted Cruz missed the vote on the bill that would allow this to be done." And this was back in February 22nd, 2016. So it seems like Trump is all for auditing the Fed. And I know that he has, and I said this many times on my other reports, he has Andrew Jackson hanging on his wall, and Andrew Jackson went after the second central bank of the United States. Do you think that this is where this is headed?
Yeah, I mean, look, you give up your sovereignty if you can't print your own money. And, fractional reserve banking and central banking, we basically outsource the sovereignty of our nation to these private citizens, half of which aren't even U.S. citizens. So for sure, he's probably figuring, how do I do this in such a way that I can bring about this change? One way is let them hang themselves. The other way is to put pressure on them and get documents into the public where they can see the sweetheart deals that were cut between our banks and the European banks and some of the Asian banks, that Americans lost their homes and these people got free money. Can you imagine those headlines? So I'd love for it to happen. I know he would support it in a New York Minute, pardon the pun, but he absolutely for the sovereignty of the U.S. And it's so misleading to say, well, if the governments control the money, they're going to outspend us. Well, the central bankers have already debased their currency 99%. So, it's not like they have any kind of leg to stand on in that regard. That argument to me is moot. I'd rather have a politician debase it that I can throw out of office versus a central banker, which I don't even know what they're doing. So I hope it goes. The IRS thing would be interesting too. Why should citizens pay anything if governments are printing their own money anyway? Just print what you're going to spend if that's the route you're going to take. So that would be economic freedom I can get behind as well.
I agree. Bob, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people reach your website and see what you do?
Yeah, so go to tradelikeagenius.com, and then we offer trade signals for stocks and cryptocurrencies. Also what's called binary options, which is a really great way to trade. It's basically kind of like trading with some training wheels on, but it has really good leverage. You can make some really good money. We have basic packages, advanced packages. We have coaching. We have a whole training library that people can purchase and take advantage of all of our experiences doing this stuff for over 20 years. And we put together some specials for your listeners, Dave. If they buy by the 21st, we put together some winter bundles for them, and that are already pre-discounted, 50 to 65% off our normal pricing. And I sent you some proof statements from the trades every month that we do trades. I send you the things that we trade, and just so you can, if you want to share those with your audience, you're welcome to do so. Just to show that just following our trades, you're going to be able to easily pay for what we're providing and be a profitable relationship with us. So thanks for letting me plug it, and I'd love for people to come check us out. I think you'll like it.
Great. Bob, once again, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Have a great day.
You too.